When I did my O-levels, I got the highest mark in the United Kingdom. I got the only one to ever get 100% in an O-level. People wanted this job. It was without a doubt probably one of the best jobs you could get in policing, right? On working on the River Thames. Oldest police force in the world to be four years old, because they said a boy can consent to anal sex, a boy can, and there can be a loving, sustainable relationship. This is, and these are people that work for the government. They go into work next day, high up boss comes down and said, right, that's it, you're off, you're removed from the unit.
But yeah, I normally just like to start, just say thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Today we have Jon Wedger in with us. And normally I like to start actually, it's just by asking, background, what's growing up like, and, what inspired you to join the police force, really, because that's where it started for you.
Yeah, well, I never went on a life journey to become a police officer. I had no real interest in becoming a copper.
Okay.
It's one of them strange things. It's you have a plan. My plan was to become a vet because I love animals. I absolutely adore animals, and I like helping.
Yeah.
And I'm quite a soft person. I'm not a confrontational person. I did become that, but I never started out as that. It sounds conceited, but I've got quite a high IQ. It's I'm an underachiever in that respect. I should have gone a lot further, but life circumstances didn't take me that way. My background, my entomology, as it were, on this is that I come from a working class family. My father was a black cab driver. Okay. He was the offspring of Anglo-Sicilian migrants, and his father died when he was quite young, just post-war. My parents met in that post-war period, and we were born. I've got an older sister and I've got a twin sister, and we lived in Paddington in central London. And there was a big move to get people out of, because they were redeveloping, because these bomb sites after the war, they went on for decades. They didn't have the money to refurbish it. There was still, like, in the late 60s, and that's still bomb sites. And there was a lot of dust and smoke and everything else. So there was a push to get families out to green pastures, and they called it new towns. So they sprung up all around London. Yeah. And so there was one for each sort of geographical region of London. So southeast London's got sent out to Kent, and and us lot, we got sent out to Hertfordshire. Okay. So I ended up in Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, and it's one of them towns where it's 50% council, 50% private owned. It's a bit like Hatfield, Harlow and Hemel. There's three of them, and some of them are a bit shitey, to be honest. But I loved it. I had a lovely upbringing. I loved school. I had great friends from school. I did well at school. Secondary school, I liked it. Funny enough, my twin sister didn't. She sort of got bullied, but I never got bullied. And if I did, I didn't let it bother me. I think we all get bullied and pushed around and things like that. And there's some nasty kids out there, but it never really bothered me. I didn't let. And I found that if you made it an issue, it became an issue. So.
Right. Okay.
I know some kids have a rough time. You know, and I found that one out. But and I just from early on, I just wanted to work with animals. And I had a dog. Used to walk the dog miles. So a bit of a loner. I'm not into group things. No. I'm not into anything organised. So it's a pop concert. If it's a football match, you won't get me nowhere near them. But if it's something on your own, alone or in a small group, I really warm to it. And I used to like watching like crime programmes. Sweeney was big when I was growing up. Okay. And then there was a film that came out in, I think it was the late 70s, early 80s, called Serpico. And it was Al Pacino played the true story of a bloke called Frank Serpico, who was a New York detective, and he spoke out about corruption. And his own colleague shot him in the face, right? They shot him in the face. It's just the most brutal way to deal with corruption. Whistleblowing. And he's what you class as a whistleblower, this guy. and it's a brilliant film. It was a cult film. It was iconic. It was just great, and it really sort of gave Al Pacino his name.
Yeah.
And I think he went on to do great things after that. And I watched it, and I remember thinking, wow, what an amazing guy. And it was all set in like 1970s, 60s New York, when it was in a terrible state. And of course, we're always 20 years behind that.
Yeah.
And London started going that way. And so things were sort of really good, but my father was absent a lot. He never he didn't like family life. And he sort of moved out the family home when we were quite young, and we'd only see him, a couple of times a week, and then it wasn't for long. And back then, divorce, because he came from a Catholic, like an Italian background, divorce was a no-no.
Yeah.
And religion had a huge, strong influence on people's lives.
Which is lost now.
It's gone. It's finished. It's gone. It's all self-worship, atheism, and everything else, and I can really get into that because it had a big impact on my life, like that sort of theistic side of things. And it started to have an effect on me because I started to become sort of academically lazy, and I was a high achiever. I was doing very, very well, and so teenage years I got lost. I just got lost, and I stopped really. I just stopped bothering.
Yeah.
And so my results went from top. I was in the top grades for everything, and they plummeted. But the one thing I took an interest in was computing. Computers came out, and I did really well with them. I was good with languages, and computing was seen as a language. And when I did my O-levels, I got the highest mark in the United Kingdom. I was the only one to ever get 100% in an O-level.
Really?
I got 100%, yeah. Because I was so focused on it, and I understood it when no one did. So the teacher that took us for computing, he said, look, you need to go to university. And he said, you'll probably get sponsorship. And I wrote a program for London Underground when I was 16. And it was all about whatever station you're at, where you can go to nearest tourist attraction, things like that. And they liked it. And there was talks about them sponsoring me to go to university.
Okay.
So I could have, back then, if I'd have got into computer programming, that would have been it. I think by 30 I could have retired.
Yeah.
But my father died, and I was still very young, and I just got lost. I just didn't know the way forward. I didn't.
Do you think you lost your sense of purpose then?
Yeah, totally went. They call it a raison d'etre, your reason for being. My raison d'etre just sort of drifted off, and then I got an apprenticeship with a heating and ventilating company, and that was in central London, and it was as a trainee architect, and I had to have A-levels to get in it, so I had to sit an exam, and I did incredibly well at the exam, and they took me on. So I was going to a technical college, building college, training to be an architect, but I just didn't want to do it. It was boring.
Yeah.
Just sat in the office, and back then, this was mid-80s, they said, in a few years you'll be on £50 an hour. Can you imagine £50 an hour 40 years ago? You could have bought a house. You could buy a house for 13, 15, 20 grand back then,
So what's the average rate back then? Like,
I think a good rate was about £7 an hour.
Bloody hell. Jesus, wow.
That was good money, £7. If you got £7 an hour, but apprentices were getting £25 a week.
Yeah.
A week. So that would have been half hour's work. But and I just got bored with it. And I just thought, I don't do this. So I left.
Yeah.
And I went to work as a bricklayer's mate, as a labourer.
Okay.
So I went from one extreme to the other. And I'm not denigrating anyone, but I think we all have a place. I'm not. I think God doesn't care who you are, what you are, but there's something in the class system that I think works. I do. I generally think that back then people were proud to be working class.
Yeah.
I don't think you should be proud to be a lower underclass. I think that might be a life decision, but working class, there was definitely a pride in that. And anyway, I ended up on building sites as a labourer, I sort of did all right, but it wasn't taxing. It was quite painful for me intellectually, because all they would talk about, they'd get the Sun newspaper and they'd go to the back page and talk about sport, football, not sport. They're not interested in cricket or boxing or anything. Football, and I hated football. And they got page 3 and they talk about tits. So shagging and football were the only things they spoke about, right? And that was it. And it drove me nuts. I think I can't be here. And it just wasn't my place.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking tradesmen or anything like that, and I'm really not, but some are intellectually a bit void, you know, and if that's how you want to take it. But it's like having, you're right, we're surrounded by pictures of super bikes here. It's like having one of these super bikes and treating it like a little moped and doing 15 miles an hour. It's no good, is it? It's designed to
exactly.
And the same with your mind. If it's designed to achieve something and you're not, it sends you crazy.
Yeah.
It sends you absolutely nuts. So I thought, I don't know what to do. I had a passion. I loved swimming, right? And I thought it was too late for me to become a vet, because veterinary university was expensive. I hadn't taken A-levels, and to go back would be seen as reverting and not moving forward. So I didn't bother that, and I just thought, I don't know, maybe I'll go to Australia, maybe I'll go to New Zealand, and I could do something with dolphins or something, I don't know what, on boats. And I was just totally lost. And then I got an apprenticeship with British Telecom, and it was fixing phone lines, but it was technical. We would wire up these big heavy cables that fed whole towns and cities, and it was in a big engineering centre, and we worked in pairs. We'd get a lorry and we'd go out and we'd go on the road outside, and I didn't actually think it would work, but it did, because I then got into fitness. I started cycling into work, like that, and in my lunch break, when everyone would go and play snooker and all that, I used to go swimming, so I could go and I could do a mile swim. And because I had limited time, I tried as hard as I could to swim a mile in under 25 minutes on breaststroke, which turned out to be a competitive rate, you know, a swim rate. And I could do it, and I was doing real good quality times every single day. And I just got addicted to swimming. And then I took up scuba diving, and not many people were doing it back in the 80s. And I did it. I found a little club, and it was like a little group of mates, and I loved it. I thought, I want to be a diver. I'm going to dive. Anyway, a guy said to me, do the commercial course, because these guys are earning £2,000 a week. And they were called saturation diving. They died of brittle bone disease 30 years before their time, but they were earning big money. So I thought, right, I'll go on a course. But it was so expensive. The course was just so much money. I thought, I'm not going to be able to make that. And my sister had joined the police. She was a fingerprint expert. She would study fingerprints, and she could match them before computers did it. She was one of these geniuses that used to deal with people's fingerprints and match a print to a suspect and all that. And she said, look, the Met Police have just sacked all of their dive team for corruption. So that what the divers were doing, they were selling all their equipment and getting the police to reboost it, give them new equipment again, and they were flogging it. And so they all got nicked and suspended. So they had no diving team. So they started recruiting it. And in the police, there's all these different departments, you know, and they've got to, you know, by the Home Office, they've got things like horses, specialist units, divers, drivers, and all that. So you have to be a copper, a bit like the army, and then you can specialise. So I thought, well, I could do that. But the problem was, back then, there was a lot of football violence. And there was Saturday sports was always like a wash at the end of the grandstand, the programme for sports on Saturday, with just people kicking off, Millwall, West Ham. It was, and they just showed the police fighting, a proper fighting with these hooligans, and the coppers were getting smashed up. And I thought, I'll do that. I'm not a man to do that. These are ex-soldiers, these are ex... And I thought, no, I can't do that. And I thought, maybe I'll join the army. And I went away for a weekend with my mate on army training, selection team. And I got through it. I hated it, because I'd been told what to do.
Yeah.
And it was just mind numbing. And marching, and I said, my mate, there's no way on the planet I can do that. So I thought I'd join the fire brigade. So I applied to join out, and I passed everything. And it was quite competitive back then, so I passed it all, and they offered me a job. But I'd also filled out the application for the police, and then they asked me to go on it was like a 3-day selection thing. It was quite intense back then, and I passed that. And the 2 jobs got offered to me at the same time. But one was like this sort of time of year, 30 years ago. One was to start in February, and one was to start in April. So I put in for voluntary redundancy because British Telecom were making people voluntary redundant and paying good money, really seriously good money. So I put in for it, and they said, yeah, you can get it, but not until March. So if I join the fire brigade, I won't get my money.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee I'll pass the training. But if I join the police, even if I don't pass the training, I don't care. I've got enough money to survive for a year. It's really good money. So I thought I'd have to join the police, and I didn't want to. So I went along and I joined the police, and I just hated it. And I absolutely hated it. From the moment I walked through the training centre, it was horrible.
Was that the people, or was that just...
Yeah, everything. The regime, the people, the discipline.
Yeah.
The discipline was like being in the army.
Right.
It was just so strict, and the people, they were tossers.
Yeah.
They were. It's horrible to say it, because it was power, and it was ultimate power, and you saw what it did to people. Even so, you turn up at the training centre, you'd have to get the underground train to Colindale, and these recruits that were at the end of their training would pick you up. So they already had their uniform and all that, and they were just tossers. They were just arrogant, and then they took you to the training centre, and when you got there, you got split into your classes, and then the sergeants would come and just shout at you, just shouting, and just rude to you, and then you got told the house rules, and then the next morning you have to be very, very smart. You couldn't even have a little speck of dust on you. It was awful. And then they lined us all up outside the statue of Robert Peel, I think one of the first commissioners of police, outside the training centre, which was the biggest in the world. And I remember looking down, honestly, and it was about 400 recruits, and they were in 3 files, and it was dead straight line, and it was deadly silent, and it was like that, immaculately presented. And then the officer and parade would come out, and everyone had to stand to attention. They showed you how to do that, and then they basically came around and just shouted at people and tried to find any. And one of the things they would do, your shoes had to be shiny.
Yeah. And
the guards regiment came in and showed you how to polish your shoes. And if they weren't to that standard, that was it. It was a big problem. And they'd come along, the officer would come along, and the sergeants would walk before him, and one of them would deliberately tread on your shoes and smudge them. And it was just stupid. And then you get shouted at, and then you get put on an early parade. So you had to get 5 a.m. in the morning, you'd have to present yourself, and it was just all that sort of rubbish went on, and I just hated it. I absolutely hated it. I didn't want to be there. I lost my voice, ironically. My first day I lost my voice. I was told if my voice didn't come back, I was out. That was it, finished. To be honest, I was unhappy when my voice did come back.
Yeah.
But it was the irony of it. I went in silent, but when I left, it was a total opposite scenario. And I just hated it. And they were going to backclass me, so back squadding me, but for attitude. And one of the reasons was I smiled too much. And they said if I smiled when I went on the street, I would be a risk to myself and my colleagues, because people would kick off for smiling.
Really?
Yeah. And attitude, and my pass marks were just average. And one of the sergeants was in a meeting, and this one particular sergeant hated me, and this colleague had heard them on about a conspiracy to sort of get rid of me, really. And he come up to me and he said, "Look, I need to chat with you." He said, "Listen," he said, "you remind me of a guy I joined with." and a black guy. He said his name, and it turned out I knew his brother. Right, I grew up with his brother, and I went, "He's got a brother called Peter." And he went, "Yeah." So I said, "I know these people." He went, "We just like him. You just shouldn't be here. You're just not. But you'll be good on the street.
Yeah.
You're honest, and you'll be good on the street." He said, "My friend was just the same. They did everything to try and kick him out. He said, you just got to get through, right? But they're going to find anything." He said, "Look, you're just scraping by on your marks." He said, "You need to get top marks every week. I had an exam. Very intense learning, and it was about 5 months of training." He said, "You've got to pass that." So I did. So I for the rest of my training, it was only a couple of months left, I was getting 95, 100% and all my, because I could do it. I had the ability to do it.
Was that just the determination, do you reckon? It was just like...
Yeah, well, they were just finding any excuse to throw me out. This one guy just didn't like me. And years later, he got kicked out for, it was either attempted rape or sexual assault. He was fiddling with the young recruit girls. Married guy, really weird. I've had this all my life. The sex offenders just don't like me.
Yeah.
They just don't like me. They hate me, So
they can do you want them to like you.
Yeah. Well, it's the result, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've done the right thing. So that was my training. I passed it, and I was happy to get out of there. It was killing me. But they had a really good swimming pool there, so I swam every day, and the training facilities were fantastic. So I now go on the street, and I get sent to South East London, and I didn't even know where it was. I got sent to an area called Woolwich, and I remember seeing it on TV because there was a shooting, and armed robbers got shot by police, and that was like, I think the year before I went, a team of armed robbers got shot by the police, and then when I went there, a young lad got murdered called Stephen Lawrence.
Okay.
And there was a big racial aggravates to Stephen Lawrence inquiry. It was a black kid got murdered by 3 white lads, and it was my team that dealt with it. And so they was all under investigation for racism and everything else. So there was a lot of paranoia, and the bullying was just off the charts, right, for the new recruits.
Yeah.
So you just get bullied, right? But I found it funny.
Yeah.
They'd like, you get your dinner and somebody throw it on the floor, or they get my locker and they put it in the backyard, turn it upside down, put hose in it, so all my kids wet.
Yeah.
And but I found it funny. It made me laugh. Or you'd be writing notes and someone just get them up and rip them up, or spit on them, or something stupid like that, But the lad that I went as a probationer with, he actually had a nervous breakdown. He couldn't cope with it, and he became suicidal. He lost something like 3 stone in weight, and I just said, "Don't let them get to you. It's just a joke," But it was very violent, and on the street was violent, and I did really well on the street. I was in the wrestling team, so I took up wrestling, and I did really well at wrestling. And so when I went on the street, everything ends up in a fight. So I started doing well with fighting, but I started getting people giving me information.
Okay.
Right? And I started getting quite liked on the street, and it did me really well, and I loved it. From hating it, I went on to loving it.
Yeah.
But again, there was a sergeant there that hated me. He didn't like the fact that I smiled and all that, and tried to make my life a misery. But he sort of couldn't, because my team liked me, the people on the street liked me, and I liked doing it. So anyway, one of the older sergeants there, he'd been a detective, and he used to tell me stories about when he was at the West End and the drug gangs of prostitution and all that.
Yeah. And
he said, "That's what you want to head for." He said, "One day I'll take you, when it's nights, I'll take you up Scotland Yard and I'll show you how the detectives work." So he took me up to Scotland Yard on nights and showed me the drug squad office and all that. And I just thought, it's like that film Serpico,
Yeah.
I thought, this is all right. But on a personal level, what had happened is I'd met a girl, and her dad was in prison for attempted murder, and I think he'd shot a policeman or stabbed a policeman or something. And he'd a violent man. But she had 2 kids, and I started a relationship with her, and I got her pregnant. But what I didn't realise was she had a drug problem. I didn't realise it. And then the police weren't happy, the police weren't happy that I was linked in with his family that were very well known in the area. It's trouble, you know. And it all went wrong. So it just everything sort of caved in on me at once. And there was all sorts of stuff going on. I was in trouble with a lot of things because I didn't know the rules. No one bothered to teach me the rules, and I was living this crazy life. And I ended up on a discipline panel.
Okay.
And this one sergeant had instigated it, but there was all sorts of things. There's all sorts of crazy things that had gone on. I was on the charge of taking off gratuities. Some guy was trying to bribe me, but by using fish. So instead of like trying to pay me off cash, he worked at Billingsgate Fish Market. He used to bring in fish every week and drop fish off for me. And he then tried to get favours that he shouldn't have got.
Yeah.
And bribe, I think I was the only copper ever to be bribed with cod and haddock ever. And I told him to get stuff once. He got caught drink driving, wanted me to sort it out. And he kicked off. But he had a box with him. And he threw this box at me in the police station over the front counter, and a whole salmon in it. And it came flying out, hit me, knocked me over, just as this other sergeant walked past and saw this happening, me being hit with a massive salmon. But there's loads and loads of things going on, and none of them were malicious, none of them were criminal intent. Yeah. The law, what you got to understand is about criminal intent. The physical act of doing it, but the criminal intent must go in concert with it. So I end up with a discipline panel, and this sergeant reads out all the evidence that he collated against me, and the 2 senior officers on the discipline panel couldn't stop laughing. They were just laughing, and one of them laughed so much all snot come out his nose. I can remember him, and he was just in stitches, and he just said, you know, son, the problem you've got is this isn't the 1970s. He said, if you'd have been about when I joined, he said, mate, you'd be an inspector by the end of the year. And he went, look, you've done nothing wrong. It's just 2 different cultures meeting. He said, look, you've got to take it a bit more seriously. But he said, you're going to have a great career. He said, you want to have a great career. He said, don't worry about this. I'm writing it off. It's down to experience. He said, Monday morning, because this was the end of the week, he said, we're moving you. You're going to Peckham. But Peckham was next door.
Yeah.
Right. So we dealt with a lot of overspill crime from Peckham and vice versa. And I went, what's Peckham like? He went, well, pretty similar, but a few more black people there, and that's it, you know, because Woolwich was a bit white areas and all that. So he went, yes, pretty much the same, isn't it? He went, you're just going to get in trouble with Peckham, aren't you? And I went, I hope not, but he went, you will. He said, where do you want to go? I said, I'm from Paddington. He said, right, we'll send you to Paddington. Go to Paddington. So I get sent to Paddington, but they were fully subscribed. So they said, well, there's a new police station just opened, Belgravia, which was a couple of miles down the road. Go there, we'll send you to Belgravia. But what I didn't realise was that police corruption was apparently it's all-time high, which was a nonsense. Them days were long gone, but corruption was still a big thing, right? And it was quite overt corruption, and that old school culture, mainly in the detective department, the CID, it's just rife. It was endemic, and these were tough guys. Some of these detectives, these were hard men. And the Commissioner of Police, Sir Paul Condon, at the time, he decided to out corruption in the biggest anti-corruption swoop the police has ever had. So he decided to take all these corrupt officers, that were mainly in the flying squad, the regional crime squad, and the national crime squad, right, put them all together in one police station, right, which was Belgravia. Right. And it was to be monitored with covert anti-corruption officers, right? So all the phones in the CID were monitored. It was the only police station that had swipe card access then, so they monitored every time someone came and went. Okay. And all the flats at the back, they had observation posts on there. So they had trackers on cars, everything. They were out to get these guys, you know. and they were involved. Some of these cops were involved in drug dealing, attempted murder, armed robbery. There was 3 of them were going out and doing armed robberies in mainland Europe on their days off. Proper armed robberies. Coppers. Madness.
And with them being moved there, I'm guessing they didn't know, obviously, they were being watched, and why it was all... Was it more like a promotional thing?
No, they knew that they were bad boys, but they were all lumped together. They all sort of knew each other from, you know, and they were tough guys. You know, these were seriously corrupt individuals. That I'll give an example. One of the inspectors, the DIs, and we're talking back then, they were like God. You know, you didn't even talk to a DI.
Yeah.
He was a great big guy. They called him the Ginger Giant. He's in all these anti-corruption books, right? Big man. And there was a problem with one of the sergeants, the detective sergeants. So it's mainly in the CID, so it's totally separate.
Yeah.
You've got your uniform, do their stuff, zoom around, and then you've got the CID, and they don't mix. And you're not really allowed to mix with them. They call them the lids. You don't mix with the lids. You're with us now, you know. And I'll tell you how I got into that. And he had a problem with the sergeant, so instead of sort of like dealing with it in a professional, he just went up and punched him full out in the face, and the guy's bone, hit this bone there, the cheekbone, splintered, and a shard of splinter went in his eye and blinded him in front of everyone. Went up, crack. The bloke went down. He went, leave him there. Don't no one call an ambulance. He stays there. And they had to pension the guy off because he was disabled. He's lost his sight in his eye. That's the sort of stuff, you know. People will get headbutted, and it's just mental. So they shoved them all in this nick, but at the same time there was like diversity quotas, and they decided to get all the gay and lesbian officers and also shove them all in this nick, right? So I turn up, I'm what they call under a cloud. And they said, if anyone asks, just say that you chose to come here, right? And my file had been sent over, and the person who had received my file has got 2 years service on it, right? And he went, it's an admin error, right? There's no way anyone gets in this level of trouble in 2 years and gets moved. So he just put, because my hair was going grey, he put 22 years. So they thought I had 22 years service, right? But I was just baby face looking old guy, you know, and because my skin's quite dark, I suppose he thought I was a bit older than I was. So I get sent in amongst this, and then I end up very quickly being put in the detectives department, you know. So I'm in amongst all these crazy people, and I remember my first day, this guy comes up to me. He went, "You're new?" I went, "Yeah. I transferred." He went, no one transfers here, mate. It don't happen. He said, you come here for 2 reasons. You're either bent or you're bent. What are you? I goes, well, I must be bent then. And then I ended up very quickly in the CID, and it was just crazy times. It was brilliant, I must admit. I loved it. But on a personal level, my missus had left me.
Yeah.
And I'd had another kid, so there's now 4 kids at home. Because of her issues, her addictions, and I ended up in the family court, and it turns out that there were findings of guilt on child neglect against her, so she wasn't allowed the kids. So my 2 came with me. My youngest was 9 months, 2 years, one's 9 months, but her 2, I think 6 and 5, they were putting them in care. And I went, you can't do that. They're like, you just can't do it. So I said, no, don't do that. And I'd heard rumours about care homes. People would tell me, that there's a lot of abuse in there. Mainly the drug addicts would say, I was always in a care home, they rape kids in there and all that. And I didn't know too much about it. So I said to my solicitor, please don't let them go in care. And she went, well, social services like you. One, you can look after them during the day. And so I asked my mum, would you help me? And my mum was so lovely. She went, of course I'll help you. I said, look, I want to get the kids. So I made an application to the court, not adoption or anything like that. I just made an application as a kinship. So it's it's like an unfostered father, stepfather, whatever. So they gave me the residence for the kids. They just gave them to me. She didn't want them. They went, yeah, take them. It was as simple as that. And then that's how I ended up with 4 kids on my own, with a mortgage. I just bought a house, and I'm working this crazy job, and it was tough.
Yeah.
It was really, and I mean tough. I had no money, and I worked with all these corrupt people that were stealing money, that were they were wealthy people, some of them. One of them, he'd executed a warrant at a place, and in the freezer found something like 15 grand, drug dealer. Next thing, that goes missing, and he's bought new sails for his yacht.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I couldn't even afford my MOT on my car, and he's got sails for his yacht, and that's the. And then, but what had happened is that the magazine would come out every month, and it would have internal jobs.
Yeah.
You could apply for, and there was specialist posts. And they're the ones people wanted. Specialist posts. You got good training, and you was away from local policing.
Yeah.
And that's what I was all told: become a specialist, and you just have a lovely life. And the River Police had come out, so the River Police was there. But I'm a trainee detective now, and this posting was a uniform posting. But they worked 4 days on, 4 days off. I thought that'd be brilliant, 4 days off would be amazing. Shift pattern I was on was horrendous. So I put in for it, and for every position there was 2,000 applicants. It was that heavily. Yeah. People wanted this job. It was without a doubt probably one of the best jobs you could get in policing, right? On working on the River Thames. Oldest police force in the world. And the police building was built in 1798, the oldest police building ever. Wapping on the banks of the Thames, steeped in history. It was just brilliant. And I got the job. I got it, and then I went to work on the River Police, and the first thing they trained me to become a boat skipper.
Yeah.
So I did all my licenses, everything, and navigation. We used to go out to sea, and it was great. And then, so I've got my house. My mum's looks after the kids when I'm at work, and then I go back. I stay with her, and then I go back to my house for the 4 days off.
Yeah.
Another dog, but it was becoming really difficult, and the money was getting tight. So I moved in with my mum, and I shared a bedroom with all my boys. I slept on the floor for 2 years on the floor, no mattress, nothing, and just a duvet. So there was no room, so it was tough. And so I rented my house, and my mate told me to rent it to council tenants, because you get more money.
Yeah.
And the council manage it.
Sure, would it be guaranteed money as well?
Yeah, it was coming in. Anyway, it was a lie, right? Because they'd palm me off with this rubbish contract where, they'll pay me more, but they're not maintaining it, right? And the tenants it was a woman and her kids. She started running my house as a brothel. Her kids get abused by some guy she links in with and gets her kids taken off her. So now they won't pay me the full amount.
Yeah.
She starts selling drugs. Police do warrants, kick all my door in, find drugs so they won't replace it. So my house is trashed.
Yeah.
And then she sets fire to my house, burns it down.
Bloody hell.
Burns my house down. So I've lost my house, gets burnt. Honestly, it was just madness, right? And on top of this, I've got and one of my kids went blind.
Really?
Went blind, and then he had to have an operation, and they managed to save his sight.
Wow.
And it was awful. It was horrendous. So I had all that going on, but on top of that, I'm working on the River Police, and it's great. But they didn't really want to do much work because they didn't go there to work. They went there to just drive boats and DOS.
Yeah.
And the sort of weren't the volume of crime that they made out, but the Commissioner of Police had to keep them because they were ancient unit and all that. So they were pretty much guaranteed a good life. And a lot of them had second jobs. Some were doing all sorts of things, and they had a lot of money. And I was bored, and I started nicking people. And I was very busy on the street, and I had high arrest rate, and that's what I wanted to do. So I was nicking people for bits of drugs and things like that. And then I got involved in a big drug importation job, which actually ended up, I think they made a program about it. There was a boat coming from Jamaica, and it had all the cannabis in the rudder housing, huge sugar boat, and it went to the sugar refinery in the East End, in Canning Town, Silvertown, and I spotted something in the river, and it was 2 divers, and they'd gone under and they'd unhooked this 2 ton of cannabis. Yeah, and I've got a hit put in, and we caught them, you know. So,
really? So that was just you seeing the divers?
Yeah. And we had night vision goggles, and I said to my mate, there's something in the water there. And he went, no, it's a duck. I went, oh, it's gone now. And then it come back again. So it was this little green light. It was going, there was 2 of them, and then they sort of disappeared, and then about 5 minutes later they come up again. I went, mate, they're back. The ducks don't go under that long, and they're quite big. I went, they ain't a duck. And then so we called other units in and said, look, something going on here, and zoomed in, and it was these guys with 2 ton of cannabis.
Bloody hell.
And it was there was some big ex-criminal, one of the Essex firm or something, was on about, yeah, we imported these drugs. I'm thinking, that was my job, that was. Right,
and the Essex boys, sorry. Or...
Yeah, it's linked to that, something connected to that. There, some of them, they had organised this thing, you know, and of course I nicked it off them, I nicked their drugs off them, and that was that. And anyway, it started, things like that were happening.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realise was that because the police station was on the river, it was classed as a port.
Oh, okay.
And therefore it had to have special branch, and therefore it had to have links with customs and excise and all that. So it's all this weird red tape, and so they had an intelligence unit there that linked in with special branch that monitored everything. I didn't realise it. And there's this sergeant there that sat in the desk. He had never had any reason to be in this part of the building. It's an old, really old, big, old, massively pre-Victorian. I don't even know what era that goes back to. And it was a lovely building. And I go past one day and there's a bang on the window, and it's this sergeant from the intelligence unit. He went, come in here, get in here. I went, all right. He said, sit down. He started telling me what was going on and what he was doing, and he went, look, you're getting really busy, aren't you? And I went, yeah. He said, I know you've got problems at home. I've done some research on you. He said, if I can guarantee you keep the shift pattern to, 4 days on, 4 days off, will you come and work for me? And I went, well, doing what? He went, it's investigating role. You can go back on your detectives program. I was like, oh, brilliant. He went, just work for me. He said, I need someone as a field intelligence officer. And I went, all right, what's that? And he said, you just work out there, recruit informants, whatever, but it's a specific role. He said, you're going to be attached to the paedophile unit at Scotland Yard. I was like, seriously? He went, yeah. He said, I want you to track down paedophiles. I went, okay. Well, I didn't know much about them. So he said, look, they're coming out of prison and they're getting on canal boats. And we got 2. And it's come from the Home Secretary. We've got to look into this. So it's unlimited overtime. You do what you want. It's come from the Home Secretary. You just crack on. And he said, try and find me 2 more. He said, what do you need? I went, I don't know. I said, cover push bike. And he went, yeah, we'll get you a bike. And I said, so my day was just riding a push bike around the canals, right? And just talking to people and all that. And there was a bit more of a methodology to it, but I won't go into it too deep because it will take a while. But I basically just lied to the residents of Canal, saying that I was a home beat officer for them, and I was there to deal with their crimes of choice, which were kids throwing stones, and people nicking their bikes. And they like to smoke a little bit of weed, so they thought they were, the police were the Babylon and all that, quite middle classy, hippie types, odd bunch back then, not now, but back then they were a bit of an odd bunch. And but in amongst this community, paedophiles had attached themselves. And I started setting up community meetings and giving talks about crime prevention. I just read books on it and made it up.
Yeah.
I didn't know nothing about it, crime prevention or anything. It was just a lie. And because all I needed were their names.
Yeah.
Because they were registering boats in different names and all that. And no one knew who these people were. And I just started finding their bikes for them and getting bits of canal dredged and nicking the kids that were throwing stones, and of course they loved me for it. But at the same time, I was getting their names, and first month I was just busy. And I go back for a meeting, and the meetings were in police stations, because it was to do in the intelligence community now. I didn't realise how covert this intelligence community is. And because it was to do with sex offenders, there was all these government departments that had sex offender units. So the National Health has got one.
Yeah.
The Post Office has got one. They'll monitor post. The Customs have obviously got one for people going to Thailand. See all these people going out to Thailand. I'm telling you now, you're monitored. Especially because it's a paedophile route.
Right.
They watch all these things now on social media. Come to Thailand, the food's good. No, mate. People go there because they can get young kids. When men go on their own there, if you go there for prostitutes, or they go there for kids, and that's that. And and the Thai government can get stuff. You see a lot of these expats going out there and saying, "Oh, the police are tough on crime and all that." Oh, they might be tough on Westerners not wearing motorbike helmets and having a drunken fight in the street, where they provide the alcohol, the cheap alcohol, and all that. And then locking them up for 50 years for a joint and rubbish like that. Yeah, they might be tough on that, but they totally and utterly patronise paedophilia, that government. Despicable government, bizarre, so what would you rather have, but you get all these expats out here. Thailand's brilliant, England shot to pieces.
Yeah.
But we don't patronise paedophilia like your lot do, and they do.
Yeah.
They do. Appalling, yeah, so it's twisted values, they call it cognitive distortion. So there was all these weird government departments, and we'd meet for intel meetings, but they'd be on my way here, right? We discussed this, and I saw a building in the middle of the sort of windswept agricultural lands, and I knew that was a government building, and of course you confirmed that it was. It's some sneaky beaky government, because I go to meetings on these places, and there'd be like porta cabins on these old airfields in the middle of nowhere. And we'd meet for intelligence purposes, right? With the intelligence services, the thing called SIS, the Secret Intelligence Service, and these various policing units, national crime units, all that. And we share information about paedophiles. And it was then when I started realising how monumentally big this is, and also there's a huge government interest in it and knowing what these people are doing, whereas other criminality there isn't so much. You just shouldn't steal, and you shouldn't do armed robberies and all that, but it's quite rudimentary policing. This was on another level, and very sinister as well. Nothing seemed to be really done about it. They knew about it, but they did nothing about it, and they started telling me about big posh schools, private schools, where there's paedophiles in there, really well-known fee-paying schools, and there was information about people working in there. And then I started getting told about actors, and someone had some information on one well-known comedy actor. One guy, he brought up this info about him, and I just think everyone thinks this guy's brilliant. And then there was, probably one of the most iconic British singers, rock singers. His name's there, he's done a runner to another country because they found child porn on his computer, and he made out he's out resting abroad. And the guy said, no, it's because he can't get nicked. And it really changed my way of thinking. And I was thinking, this is madness. These are people very high up.
So then what years would have this been?
Early 2000.
Okay.
But what had happened is that in the first year, first month, I was told to find 2 paedophiles in addition to the 2 that existed. So I had to monitor the 2 they knew about and find 2 more, and that would show that it would sustain itself, because it was first time they'd ever done it. Anyway, I went back to this meeting and I produced evidence of 90 paedophiles, and they were blown away. They couldn't believe it. So that was it. That was my career cemented. You crack on. So the paedophile unit said, what do you need? I said, look, I'm no good with paperwork. So they gave us, so young in service as well, they gave me my own analyst, my own collator, I had my own office staff, and all I had was a push bike. And we were smashing it. And I started getting information from all around the world of paedophiles on boats and this, and it was just unbelievable. It was one of the most successful intelligence operations ever running. And we all worked so well together because we didn't like people fiddling with kids. And one of the real old sweaty detectives from the paedophile unit said to me, "Be careful, John, be careful." He said, if you're on drug squad or you're on the robbery squad and you're nicking people and getting intel on the level you're at, that's it. You're going to get medals, awarded, promoted, everything. But you can't do that with paedophiles. He said they'll shut you down. And then he went on to tell me about ministers from the government, that they had information, were actively involved in the raping of young boys, high up ministers, And he said, we had this guy, one of them, so high up, banged to rights, and when we produced information and put the job together, the government shut us down, and we got shut down twice for this guy. He said, it's happening to you, be careful, John, they'll shut you down and they'll do it brutally in a heartbeat. And I started understanding that there was a thing called a conspiracy. I started finding that out, and I can remember going back to my mum and said, "Mum, have you ever heard of these politicians?" Because I didn't know anything about politicians. She said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Look, this one's a pedo, this actor's a pedo." And you put on TV and you'd see him, and I said, "Mum, I can't watch this anymore, "Oh, you're paranoid, and I started getting that from people. And I'd be talking to people and they'd go, "That's rubbish." I said, "I'm telling you, these people aren't what you think." One was a footballer. Everyone thinks he's brilliant, this guy. And, there was information of him and young boys in a big upmarket Mayfair hotel. The whole weekend he'd booked the whole top of the hotel with these lads, these young rent boys. And it just started. And what you do is you end up self-censoring. And you can't tell anyone because they won't have it.
No.
They won't have it. And at the same time, we started interviewing victims, and you saw the damage it was doing. And then I started getting informants, and they were heroin addicts, they were crack addicts, because they were all abused in the care homes. Anyway, we got information about a guy that was to do with central government, that was putting together policies for children in care. He was working at a very prestigious boys' school, and he was paedophile, and he was linked to a politician, and they were linked to a group called PI, Paedophile Information Exchange, which was a pro-paedophile political organisation, which was annexed. It was connected to the Labour Party, and it was sponsored by a group called the Campaign for Civil Liberties, which went on to become the group Liberty, which campaigned for civil liberties. That Shami Chakrabarti runs it, but this group, right, the Campaign for Civil Liberties, was actively promoting a pro-paedophile group which was linked to the Labour Party. And this guy, these people wanted the age of consent between a man and a boy to be 4 years old, because they said a boy can consent to anal sex, a boy can, and that can be a loving, sustainable relationship. And these are people that work for the government. This is the twisted level. And then when you look at PI, you look at people that were involved with them. One guy was involved in a leading charity that dealt with children in poverty. Another one was to do with like the Boys Brigade. And so the information they would have access to of vulnerable kids was just off the scale. And they were linked to, they had a magazine called Magpie. And at the same time, the ITV brought out a kids program called Magpie at the same time. Subliminally, it was there, right? Those in the know, but if you didn't know, you'd think it was just. So this information went on the system. I thought, brilliant, this is a big job now. And I go into work next day, high up boss comes down and said, "Right, that's it, you're off, you're removed from the unit." I went, "What?" I was just totally dumbstruck, and he saw that I was upset. He went, "I've been told to give you any job you want in the police, any job. We'll push you. What is reasonable. I can, just go and start riding a horse. They've got to learn first and all that sort of thing." But And then he looked at me and went, look, John, what you've got to understand is how this job works. And he said, this has come from high up, and you've gone a bit too deep, and it's a way of shutting you up. This can't go any further now, and that's why. And I went, right, okay, I understand that. Don't agree with it, but I understand it. And he said, that's how it's going to be. He said, pick a job